Well, I am not a joke teller typically, but I thought it'd be most appropriate if tonight I would tell a religious joke. Some of you may have heard it before, but I enjoyed it. My niece, I was at home and I was preparing a homily in Iowa. And I was sitting there and I said to my niece, I said, do you know a funny little story that I could use to introduce my homily? And she said, well, I just heard a religious joke actually. And so she told me the joke, and I thought it was particularly funny, and I hope you do too. There were two brothers who were painters, and they were rather successful. As soon as they started out, they began by painting houses, and they did a good job. They got a lot of work, did very well. In fact, they did so well that they graduated to churches in the painting. Something they did, though, that people were not aware of is that they would thin the paint. They thinned the paint when they were painting the houses. They did the same when they began painting churches. And obviously, they made more money. The paint went further. They didn't have to use as much paint. Well, they are painting their second church, and they're way up on scaffolding up by the ceiling of the top of the church, when suddenly they hear a large clap of thunder, a bolt of lightning, and they look up, and this booming voice from out of the sky says, "Repaint, you thinners, repaint." I did make a big mistake. The homily, or that joke went over rather well that day at Mass, and my niece is sitting close to the front of the church, and so I said, and that joke came from my niece Kelly. Would you please stand up, Kelly? Of course, she was like about 13 years old. You know, that's the worst age to ask somebody to stand up, especially a young girl like that. And so afterwards, she said to me, she said, I know the joke went over well, but I will never tell you another joke for you in church. Well, tonight is going to be kind of a travelogue. The Missionary Association has prepared some slides that you're going to be seeing on the two walls. And these are basically, when I was at the shrine in the Missionary Association, some of the traveling I did to see the work of the oblates in different parts of the world. So the information I'm giving you is not necessarily new. Much of it is still what the oblates are doing and where we're serving, although the stories might be just slightly different. But I want to thank the Charitable Gifts Department, whom you just met, for putting these together, because it's certainly helpful for my talk. I think one of the times I was most afraid with some of the traveling I did to the different countries where the oblates serve was in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is that small island country off the southeast coast of India. I know that Father Tom Singer also visited there when he was director of the Missionary Association. And I remember we were in a van with Father Jivrinda Paul, who was the provincial at the time, and he was wearing cassock and oblate cross, dressed in the traditional oblate outfit. And this was at a time when I was there that the Tamils and the Sinhalese, two different tribes, were at war. And so our van is stopped as we're traveling up to the northern part of the country to the Shrine of Our Lady of the Rosary that the oblates operate. And there were some young guys that had machine guns pulled at us. And Father Javrinda gets out of the van and begins talking to these guys. Luckily, he was the same tribe that the guys were that had the guns pointed at us. But I think it was more the fact that he was a Catholic priest, and they simply respected that. And so we were allowed to continue on. But to see a 14 or 15-year-old young boy having a machine gun pointed at you was very scary. In relation to being in Sri Lanka, when we got up to the northern part of the country, this Shrine of Our Lady of the Rosary, where Father Phillips, an oblate, was the director, he was taking me around the shrine, and he was very proud. The number of acres there at the shrine is, I would say maybe 50 or 60. It's a huge shrine, maybe even larger than that. And he took me to an area of the shrine where they have a replica of Lourdes, like they do here on the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows. And so I saw the statue of the Blessed Mother, But then I looked around and I didn't see a statue of St. Bernadette. And so Father Phillips is standing right next to me, and I said, "Where's the statue of St. Bernadette?" And he said, "Oh, a number of years ago, a herd of elephants came tromping through here, and they ran over the statue of Bernadette." And then he asked me, he said, "Now you don't have those kind of problems at the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville, do you?" I said, "Well, some days, perhaps." Anyway, very interesting country, people who are very grateful for the oblate presence there. We have a huge presence there. And in fact, Father Oswald Firth, who is an oblate who had been serving in Sri Lanka, was instrumental in some of the meetings he had with ending the civil war there. It has started and stopped times before and after. But some of the dialogue that he was able to do with both the Tamils and the Sinhalese was instrumental in getting the Civil War stopped. At the shrine that I mentioned, Our Lady of the Rosary, in the northern part of the country, we were visiting up there, and when the people would travel to the shrine, it was often a very difficult journey. And in fact, the van that we were in when we got stopped by the young guys with the machine guns told me how terrible the roads are up there. They're very bad. It was a full-day trip, and if you know Sri Lanka, it's a very small country. So we traveled from the south, Colombo, up to way in the north where the shrine is. And because of the difficulty of passage on the highways, people who wanted to come to the shrine, especially from the southern part of the country, they built huts on either side of the shrine for people to stay overnight, or even stay a few days once they traveled there, and then go back to their homes. Well, during the Civil War that was taking place, many people in Sri Lanka were kicked out of their homes if they weren't a member of the tribe that happened to be in the area conquering, or they needed a place to stay. So they would dispossess the people of their homes, and they had to go elsewhere, find somewhere else to live. And so those huts that had been built for pilgrims to the shrine were then turned over to many of these dispossessed people as a result of the Civil War. And the oblates there said that with a great deal of pride, that they could house these people there who needed housing because of the war. So, slides in Sri Lanka. Children are always the same everywhere, despite the fact that they have very little. They always seem to be happy and playing. Where they get their energy, I'm not sure, but certainly a lot of malnutrition, but the children are just always happy. That's still Sri Lanka. I think you can keep going. Here we are in Lourdes, France. I was impressed with Lourdes, where the oblates have a team of youth ministers. When I visited there were about 10 oblates there, and we were doing youth ministry for the many young people that come to Lourdes. That was kind of our specialty, as well as, of course, hearing the numerous confessions and saying masses for the pilgrims that come there. I had been under the impression that people visit Lourdes mainly because they're looking for a miracle or a cure for someone, but that really wasn't at all the case. For some people it might be, but people were really, at least told me, they were there to increase their faith, to grow in their relationship with the Lord. Therefore, reasons that a lot of people visit the shrine here in Belleville. Not so much looking for a miracle or a cure or a divine intervention, but simply to grow in their faith and do it in this very peaceful and serene place. Fatima is much the same. That's still Lourdes, I think. And of course, you have so many people in wheelchairs, people that do have infirmities who come there. As you know, after Pope John Paul II was shot in St. Peter's Square, he took the bullet that had been lodged in his stomach or chest and put it in the crown of Our Lady of Lourdes, because he really believed that she had saved him and allowed him to continue in his papacy. So that was meaningful when I was there, to me, to see the statue and realize that he had really then devoted his life to the Blessed Mother in a different way than he had before, believing that she had spared his life. And of course, we take the petitions over. Make sure your petitions get to to Lourdes every year in February. There I am lighting some candles, and that looked like chickens in that one on the right-hand corner, but couldn't be, could it? Also in Fatima. We took the prayer cloth over there too. Yes, yeah, thanks, Dennis. Here I am meeting Pope John Paul II. When I was at the shrine and the Missionary Association, they had wanted me to tell the Holy Father that the Oblates have distributed over 9 million rosaries in the world at that point. This was, he was already quite sick and had Parkinson's. And so I was able to tell him that. I didn't think he understood what I said when I told him that. But he did. He said, I know the missionary Oblates. And that was all the English he said to me. He didn't say anything else. So obviously he does know us, did know us, and is very proud of us. And it's certainly poignant that he's being canonized tomorrow. Hard to believe that I've met a saint. Well, I've met all of you, of course, but I mean a real saint. Haiti is one of the poorest countries, as you know, in the Western Hemisphere. What most impressed me about Haiti, though, was had nothing really to do with the poverty, but the work of the Oblates. One afternoon, I visited a senior center, I'm not sure what else to call it, where several Oblates who have ministered there practically all their lives, they live in a rather dilapidated house, which is a retirement home. And the facility, as you can imagine, is quite poor. You know, lights in the ceiling that don't work are burnt out. Very simple rooms. Some Oblates have to share a room with another Oblate. And there's, I think, about 11 or 12 there, several of whom are American Oblates, have been there their whole life. They could come back to the United States to retire. They choose not to. They might come back for some major surgery if they need it, but they choose to retire there. And so I visited them with them one afternoon. I got there about 2 o'clock. Most of them were just getting up from their afternoon naps. And they would come out and sit in rocking chairs on the porch, this large porch of this retirement center. And I was sitting there talking with them, and gradually several Haitians started coming by where these Oblates are sitting in these rocking chairs, and they come by and they were just checking on these Oblates to see how they were doing, if they needed anything, could they go to the store for them, did they have enough food, how were they feeling. And there would be a group of them that would come and then leave, then maybe another Haitian that would come and spend a bit of time there and leave. And the thought struck, and the Oblates were telling me that they do this every day, at least 5 days a week, because these guys, some women as well, who work in a factory or do very menial work, go out of their way to stop at this retirement facility and talk to these Oblates and make sure that they're doing okay, or try to give them whatever needs they might have. And the thought really struck me. Here these Oblates who have been ministering to these people all these years are now the recipients of the ministry from these Haitians. They've learned their lesson well. That was really meaningful to me. I don't even know if the Oblates were so aware of the lesson that these Haitians had learned, but they really cared for these guys. It certainly was clear to me why many of these American Oblates didn't want to come back here to retire. They had people checking on them probably more than they'd be checked on if they were back here in the U.S. But what a beautiful moment that was. I also visited a retirement facility for, there were about 36 Oblates, or people, Haitians, mainly men, most of whom were blind, and they were blind because of malnutrition. They had, you know, they were probably 45 to 50, 55 years old, but already in their final years in Haiti. And they were in this retirement facility. One of the Oblates would have Mass there on Sundays, and we were also supporting this little place at the time. And several of them were telling me that they knew if they were on the streets, if they weren't in this facility, they would be dead. because being blind would certainly mean that other people would steal from them and take advantage of their disability. So they felt very fortunate to be in this facility. One of my favorite places, the National Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows. Just a little story with this. I don't know how many of you know Ralph Stouter. Ralph worked at the shrine, well, actually at the Missionary Association, but also very much connected to the shrine, of course, for over 50 years, I think. And Ralph is, I believe, just fell and has hurt his hip. Yeah, so not doing so well. Keep him in your prayers. He and Gwen are just wonderful, wonderful people. In fact, they're honorary oblates. I remember when I first came to the shrine, I was talking with Ralph, and of course, I said to Ralph, I said, you know, I think it'd be great if there was some kind of miracle that was associated with the shrine. It would be great to be able to talk about what our Blessed Mother or one of the saints had done here, like Lourdes and Fatima, you know, where there's an apparition or. And Ralph looked at me, he said, you got to be kidding. He said, that's the last thing we want, is an apparition or something like that. He said, the blessing of the shrine of Our Lady of the Snows is that we can talk about the little miracles that happen in people's lives. And I thought, how true, and that often happened. I've told the story before, so if you've heard it before, I apologize. But early on, when I was here, first couple years I was here, there was a woman who came here from Pennsylvania, and she had just been told that she needed to go on kidney dialysis. I met her when they first came, she and her husband, and she told me that that's why she was here, because she was praying to accept the fact of what the doctor had told her. Well, they were here for about 3 days, and I also saw them at a mass just before they were going to leave. They were going to leave the next morning after being here for 3 days. And she said, you know, Father, I came here, and she said, I expected that I would hear from one of my sisters or one of my brothers or one of our children, and they would call to find out how I'm doing and how I'm accepting this fact that I've got to go on dialysis. And she said, I heard from nobody. She said, we've been here 3 full days. I have heard from nobody. Nobody calling, nobody wanting to find out how I'm doing. And she said that really was bothering me, but I saw that she had a big smile on her face as she's telling me this, and look over to her husband, and he's smiling. And I said, so you seem to be telling me a depressing, sad story. How come you're smiling? She said, well, she said, this place is just great. She said, I came here and I kept getting angrier and angrier that no one was checking up on me. But she said, after I visited several of the devotional sites, and she said, I went to confession and I went to Mass every day. And she said, I talked to one of the oblates. Luckily, it wasn't me. She said, I'm doing great. That was supposed to be kind of a joke, you know, that I wouldn't have been able to help her. But no, she said, something happened to me here. She said, I can't even really describe. And I look over at her husband, and he's going, yes, you know, he saw a huge change in her. I think that kind of thing happens all the time here. It's those little miracles that Ralph was talking about. I think it's good that there hasn't necessarily been an apparition or a huge event here that might take away from those little miracles. But she left here a changed person, no question about it. The Oblates have done some outreach in East St. Louis. Father Ray Cook, who's been at King's House, he's now going to do campus ministry in Houston, Texas. And Brother Ed Driggins, who has since died, but Brother Ed did a lot of work in East St. Louis for years, and we had a presence there for years before that as well. Recife, Brazil, I just went down there with Father Dave Callert. We celebrated the 50 years of Oblate presence in Recife. Many of you are familiar with Father Ed Figueroa, who's quite ill right now, or certainly in declining health. He's 82 years old. Father Ed still runs this children's home in Recife for street kids. A lot of them now are older and on their own, but certainly has done some great ministry there, as well as a whole host of different oblates. Father Ed is really an oblate with the poor, even dishing out soup to people on the streets. He drove a taxi cab for a number of years just to get to know the people of Brazil and minister to them by doing that. I wanted them to show slides of the Ukraine. I was there, I forget when, but certainly before much of what has been happening there. The Oblates have a fairly significant presence there. Two of our guys were just made bishops in Ukraine, and you've been reading about that in the newspapers. In fact, I had an email from our Superior General maybe about a month ago. He was visiting the Oblates in Ukraine, and he said they were very afraid for their own lives because of the Russian presence there and wanting to take over that country. Probably the poorest country I've ever been is Madagascar. The Oblates went there in 1980. They are mainly Polish Oblates who are there. We're getting a lot of vocations from there, at least they were when I was there maybe 10 years ago. Still a strong presence there. Dennis told me before we were looking at the slides, he said, you better explain this one. This is charcoal. And you know, as I was saying before, kids can find something humorous and something to play with wherever you go. These black kids, of course, in Madagascar are very dark complected, very black. And they loved to take charcoal, which of course is black, and smear it on each other's faces. Well, you couldn't tell that, you know, it kind of lost the humor on the kids. But that's what they loved to do, just to tease each other. And it was the kids who would try to sell this charcoal to raise money for the family to get food to eat. And of course, the charcoal is popular because people want to have it so that they can heat the food in their homes. But you'd see kids all the time selling charcoal. I'm in Lesotho here. Father Joseph Gerard, an oblate who lived in Lesotho for almost all of his oblate priesthood, is buried there. John Paul II visited that grave. He was beatified by Pope John Paul II. The oblates are really the group. We founded a university there to educate people. We really have, in a sense, invented the country of Lesotho. That maybe sounds paternalistic, but we've done a lot in terms of education there, a lot in terms of converting people to the Catholic faith. What? Dennis, I thought you weren't going to show that slide. And you see I'm the one on the right in that last one with the clown outfit. I'm with my brother in Ireland. The one on the top left is I was playing a game with some of the Native American kids up in White Earth, Minnesota. I don't remember what the game was. I think they said just put this ball between your legs and stand there. And that was taken about a year ago. I told you this job of vicar provincial and personnel director is tough. That was actually in South Africa a number of years ago. Just a few comments that I would like to make and then tell you about some projects that the Oblates are doing. I think there are three, well, I suppose you could say there's more than that, but three important ingredients for a well-lived life. And I think it's gratitude and prayer and friendship. A little sense of humor doesn't hurt too. Gratitude. I think I first learned a strong lesson in gratitude when I was a pretty young boy. I remember when my second oldest sister left home right after high school graduation, and she went down to Des Moines to study cosmetology, to be a hairdresser. You probably didn't think they had hair salons in Iowa, but we do. And she went there. Anybody else from Iowa here? Anybody ever lived in Iowa? But she went down to study cosmetology, and right after she graduated, she got on to a hairstylist place in Des Moines and began making rather good money. And so about the third year after she had been working at this hair salon, she came home at Christmas time and she had gifts for all of her brothers and sisters and mom and dad. I mean, this is over and above what we got from Santa Claus. And nice gifts for each of us. The next year, she did the same. Gifts that were totally unexpected. This was great, you know. Third year, the same thing. Well, the 4th year, she gets married in April. We didn't get a darn thing at Christmas. I went to my oldest sister and I said, you know, what happened with Carolyn? We didn't get anything this year. And she said, well, I think you're at kind of a crossroads. She said, you can either be grateful for the gifts that you got that were unexpected those last 3 years, or you can be angry that you didn't get anything this year. All of life is gift. Everything we have is gift. The fact that I can walk, that I've been able to walk many years, and I know when people are faced with bad news, or you learn that you're not going to be able to walk tomorrow because of some ailment or difficulty, it's easy to be angry, and probably you need to be angry for a while because it's new news and it's tough news. But we don't deserve anything. All of life is gift, and that little gift giving that she did that Christmas, I think helped me at least on the way to learning that. A little story about prayer, another strong or important ingredient. I remember that we would always pray as a family at night. We'd pray the rosary. And I thought, you know, as I got older, I think, okay, Mom and Dad make us pray the rosary because they want to teach us the value of prayer, and so they're setting a good example, and it's nice to see them pray, and they're hoping that I'll learn or want to pray too. But I remember one morning, I woke up before school, probably in 2nd grade, and I was looking for my shoe. And I went into the living room, and I see Mom and Dad kneeling together praying in the morning. I didn't realize they did that. And they never told us that that was important for them as a way to start their day. So when you see that, you realize and recognize that prayer is important to them just because they know that they need it in their lives, and it was a value for them. Friendship, end on this before I tell you about a couple projects. I think one of the most meaningful prayer experiences I've ever had has been when I am grateful and really concentrate on the gratitude, the things that other people have done for me. And looking at their lives, and not, you know, we always find it easy whenever we think about someone to think of their good points, but their bad points. I like this about them, I don't like this so much. But to look at someone and just to think of how they've helped me, or what they've done for me, or the advice they gave me, can be a great way to pray. And I think some of my best prayers have been, or where I felt most in tune and in touch with the Lord, has been when I left those negative things out and concentrated and focused on the good, the positive things about other people and the value they have for me and how they've helped me. I think that's what, you know, it's God's to judge, not ours, to really appreciate those people who have been a meaningful part of our lives. 2 projects I'd like to talk to you about are, the first is the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows. The roads and grounds here at the shrine, as you probably have noticed, are in disrepair. When I was at the shrine, the subsidy from the province was huge. It was in the millions of dollars, the low millions. The shrine does not pay for itself. People are very generous when they come here, but the programs and the pastoral planning, the way of lights, the many programs we offered here didn't pay for themselves. Many of them were free, as you know, if you've been here. We don't charge anything for them. And I was lucky because for years the province subsidized the shrine to a very great extent. And so we could offer those programs and to a greater extent than we're doing now, besides fix the roads and the grounds and keep the amphitheater in good shape and work on the chapels, you know, stuff done incrementally every year. Since 2008, with the economic downturn, that has changed. The subsidy to the province is much, much less. As you know, there are many demands on the U.S. province. We give $2.5 million to Zambia every year because of the number of oblates there, the people in our parishes there, in the ministries there that we do. They cannot help us a great deal. They do what they can, but the infrastructure for doing that simply is not there. And so the subsidy to the shrine is much less. There's still a significant oblate presence here. We still run good programs here, masses and confessions, and a lot of people still come here to pray, Way of Lights, and many pastoral programs still going on. But it's certainly not what it once was. And so that is a project that is near and dear to my heart, that we could keep the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows as an important and significant and good ministry of the Oblates. It's probably the ministry that's the best known in the Oblate world. The second one is a happy issue. We are building a new seminary down in San Antonio, Texas. And we're hoping to house about 25 seminarians and staff at this facility that we plan to begin building in 2015. The students there, our theology students, go to Oblate School of Theology. It's owned and operated by the United States province, the Missionary Oblates, and they receive a great education. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about Oblate School of Theology is that there's a lot of lay people that go to that school. And they are trained to be leaders in the parishes and in ministry in the United States. They receive degrees there, certificates, and there's a graduation every spring of how many would you say, Billy, of lay students? 65. You know, it's wonderful. Can you imagine the impact those 65 people each year have in various ministries, not only in the United States, but really all over the world? And so that's a significant ministry of the Oblates. Luckily, we have the problem of the current sexton house in San Antonio is simply not large enough, especially the common areas. The library, the dining room, the chapel, the common room are not large enough to house the number of students. They're not just U.S. seminarians. We're doing okay with our own U.S. seminarians, but they're also guys from Zambia, from India, and from other countries where the Oblates minister in the world. It's good to have that exchange. We just brought 2 Zambian Oblates, Emmanuel and Humphrey, who are going to be working in the U.S. for at least 3 years, maybe longer than that. So we're going to continue to do that good exchange. We have American Oblates also in Zambia, fewer than we did before, but there are still some there ministering in Zambia. So that exchange is healthy and it's good. And we want to continue that, and especially the education that they receive here in the U.S. So that's an important project. The cost we estimate between about $4 and $6 million to build this. It's in a middle to lower middle class neighborhood in San Antonio, right across the street from Oblate School of Theology. And so that's another important project. Obviously, it's a significant amount of money. Again, but those 2 projects, the shrine here in Belleville and the seminary in San Antonio, are certainly two upcoming large projects that we would invite you to support in whatever way you can. Finally, thank you so much for what you do. I really was looking forward to this evening because I know many of you. I look around and I see a few of you that are unfamiliar faces to me, but many of you I have visited. I've been in your homes. I've had time to speak with you and get to know you, and that's been a real privilege for me, and I'm so grateful, and I know I speak for all the Oblates here tonight when I say thank you. Thank you for the ways that you've supported us, your generosity, your prayers. Please continue those and know that we pray for you every day. There's not many masses that I attend with Oblates where where it's not said in the prayers of the faithful, thank you for our donors, and we pray for them and for their loved ones. So continue your good work for us, and certainly you can count on our prayers.